Science now agrees with what farmers have been saying for years. GMOs are safe and effective. New on Grow, we get local reaction, plus reaction from Monsanto's CEO as well. Also, we'll tour a poultry farm with second graders. And the governor says he's cutting red tape for farmers. And the way cattle diseases are classified sparks controversy. It's time for Grow. Blamed for cancer, allergies, and autism. Now a scientific study, says what farmers have been saying for years. Genetically modified organisms are safe. Here's NTV's Steve White with more.
Right now we're putting in soybeans.
Brandon Honeycutt loads his planter with technology.
Roundup ready soybeans, but they're also Plenish oil soybeans.
High-tech seeds like these have been blamed for food allergies, autism, and cancer. Now, some of the nation's most respected scientists say there's no evidence of any adverse health effects from eating genetically modified food. In fact, a new study says GMOs are good for health because they reduce insecticide use. And that backs up what farmers like Brandon have been saying.
We've served billions of meals with GMO crops in it, and there's been no harm. You know, we feed it to our cattle, we feed it to our pigs, we feed it to our poultry industry.
The report by the National Academies of Science found no evidence of problems for other plants and insects, but they do find some weeds are growing resistant, and GMOs may not be living up to the hype of higher yields on the farm. But overall, scientists say farmers do benefit.
We did conclude that farmers in general are gaining, especially from the BT crops, in having less pesticide use and in having higher yield.
BT is a protein inserted into corn, so the plant itself kills bugs without extra chemicals.
As we've introduced it, we've seen the corn borer population go down, which means we use less sprays.
With food companies voluntarily replacing GMO ingredients and states calling for labeling, farmers hope the report becomes part of the conversation.
Now we realize how safe this is. We can get past the fear issue and work on making farming even a better industry than what it is.
If you want to know more about the effects of butterflies or allergies, they address that as well. You can find that on our website, nebraska.tv. Now, after a study like that, they are expecting still more backlash when it comes to GMOs, and Monsanto's CEO, he's speaking up.
The thing that drives me a little bit nuts in this, the frustrating piece in this is it's such a polarized debate, and I don't think it should be, because we're going to need all of these kinds of agriculture.
He says that even though GMOs have been proven safe in recent studies, labeling laws could make consumers think differently. We'll have more on this interview tomorrow morning on Good Morning Nebraska and next week right here on NTV's Grow. And in another report, Roundup is found not to be cancerous for consumers. The report by the World Health Organization says Roundup, also known as a generic name glyphosate, does not pose a cancer risk to humans through the diet. Central Nebraska farmer blames a popular weed killer for causing his cancer. Royce Jansen of Henderson is one of 4 Nebraska men who have filed suit against Monsanto. They claim exposure caused cancer. In a lawsuit filed by former Democratic Senate candidate Dave Domina, they claim Monsanto committed fraudulent research. They're asking a federal court for damages. And big money could roll into the state through the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Some counties would be more impacted than others, though. The coalition said the deal would increase money coming into Nebraska by more than $378 million annually from the sale of ag products. With Custer, Cumming, Platte, Dawson, and Lincoln counties rounding out the top winners, Nebraska Farmers Bureau said those counties would experience more than $10 million in additional cash sales per year. Governor Pete Ricketts says lowering tariffs through the agreement would help Nebraska expand its trade relationship with Japan, one of the state's biggest partners.
The current tariffs that Japan places on our beef products going over to Japan is around 38%. If we were to pass TPP, that would come down to 9%. In countries like Malaysia and Vietnam, we'd see tariffs on our products be dropping to 0.
About 40% of the projected increase would come from Nebraska beef selling in TPP countries. The American Soybean Association calls the deal a, quote, win for soybean farmers because it means more meat exports. When our partners in pork, poultry, beef, and dairy industries do well, we do well, end quote. Proposed changes to the renewable fuel standards could mean big business for biomass diesel, but the opposite effect for ethanol. Under the EPA's proposal, the amount of ethanol production required nationwide would drop to 14.8 billion gallons. That's below the current federal law of 15 billion. EPA is expected to hold a meeting on the changes next month in Kansas City. Governor Pete Ricketts reacted to the news, saying, quote, continued efforts to lower the RFS will negatively impact Nebraska and other Midwestern states by creating uncertainty for companies who are investing in our communities and bringing the jobs we need to continue to make our state the best place in the world to live, work, and raise a family, end quote. A deadly explosion at a Texas fertilizer plant was no accident. Now farmers are coming together to roll back what they call misguided regulations. And NTV's Steve White has more.
In the wake of 15 deaths at a Texas fertilizer plant, federal regulators took a second look at the rules, saying it's critically needed to reinterpret them by removing an exemption on what had been considered retail locations, like those Nebraska farmers went to purchase anhydrous ammonia to fertilize their fields.
Hey, let's slow down here a minute, OSHA. I understand what you're wanting to accomplish, but
OSHA estimates the cost to comply around $2,100 per site. At Aurora Cooperative, the CEO figures it would be 10 times that at every location.
I mean, you could be anywhere from 8 to 12 to 16, $18 million.
Congressman Adrian Smith introduced a bill to roll back the regulations following an effort by Senator Deb Fischer to do the same.
With OSHA, with the ammonia storage that we're seeing at the retail level. I mean, can you imagine the effect of that in the state of Nebraska? It's just going to be very difficult to deal with.
Groups like Farm Bureau say this will take away options for farmers or increase costs, doing economic harm across the broader economy.
Yes, that could be extreme volatility. Well, we know what extreme volatility means, higher prices.
Now that investigators say the Texas explosion was a criminal act, farm groups and co-ops say the government has based regulations on a false premise as they push to keep the regulations from being enforced.
Gotta get back to some common sense here.
There's a new discovery on the bird flu and how it can spread. Scientists are now saying that small mammals could spread the virus. According to experiments by the National Wildlife Research Center, striped skunks and cottontail rabbits in the lab indirectly transmitted a strain of bird flu to a mallard duck after they've shared food and water sources. Officials have continued research after last year's bird flu outbreak resulted in the death of 48 million birds in 15 states. A school science project comes to life for second graders with a visit to a unique farm. NTV's Megan Johnson brings you this story.
Will chickens peck at you?
Dan Romas is more used to flocks of chickens crowding around than curious kids.
I have a second grader myself, but not 36 of them, and so it was something else.
This is very soft.
Donovan Trumbull's second graders spent an afternoon at Romas's pasture-raised egg-laying farm outside Grand Island. A field trip teachers say is extra special.
We hatched chicks in our classroom earlier for embryology through Hall County, and some of our eggs came from his farm, so we thought it'd be neat to see where they came from.
But Romas keeps an open-door policy at Prairie Pride Poultry anyway and says he welcomed this opportunity.
Planting the seeds in a future generation of possible producers. You got to start them out young, educate them, and one of the best ways is to provide a hands-on experience.
And during the tour, students saw nearly every aspect of an egg's journey to the supermarket shelf.
Oh, there you go. Having them help with collecting eggs, checking on the baby chicks, teaching them how to hold the baby chick, so you don't hurt them. Showing them, how the eggs are cleaned and having them help with that process.
A lot of times they hear that, this is where eggs come from. They come from a chicken farm, but they don't see that and they don't get to experience it. So to just spend a couple hours out out doing that makes it real, and they won't forget about this.
Soon the school bus loads up and the hens settle back down, but Romas hopes the impact lasts.
Who knows what good things we've set in motion for these young kids today.
In Grand Island, Megan Johnson, NTV News.
In an effort to categorize certain cattle diseases, some are saying that's taking decisions away from states. We're going to have details on this situation after the break. We have your Grove forecast coming up. Don't go anywhere.